Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello, can you hear me? Favor, are you there?
Ian?
Okay, shall we get started? Favor, can we get started?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Please, first off, I want to apologize for joining a bit late. I had a little bit of issues with my network, but everything is fine now. So please, if you can hear me, kindly indicate with a reaction. Maybe okay. Simon, thank you. Yeah. Okay. I see. That I'm audible and I'm visible as well. Okay, let's get started. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kojo. Thank you. I see that as well. Okay, so good afternoon, distinguished colleagues, speakers, and participants. It is a pleasure to welcome you to today's session hosted by the Africa CTA Center. Let me begin with a simple but an increasingly unavoidable reality. In today's global cotton, textile, and apparel trade, sustainability has shifted from being a business preference that used to becoming a gatekeeping mechanism. That's the reality these days. And across major markets, particularly in Europe and North America, the rules of participation in global trade are being rewritten. So regulatory frameworks on due diligence, environmental performance, and supply chain transparency are moving rapidly from policy discussion into enforceable requirements. And in the same vein, global buyers themselves are tightening their sourcing criteria. Buyers are no longer interested in suppliers who can just produce, but they are more, focused on diverting their sourcing businesses and sourcing excuse me sourcing requirements to suppliers who can produce responsibly, who can produce transparently, and whose production are in compliance with evolving um, compliance standards. Okay, so this shift for us has some profound implications for the Africa CTA Center, because while the continent has been positioned for a very long time as a high potential player in the global textile and apparel markets, the basis of competition is changing. And so cost advantages, preferential trade access, and even proximity to key markets that we used to take as our advantage, they are no longer sufficient on their own. And compliance is now a priority condition for market entry. And for us on this part of the world, we see that this is creating a clear divide. On one side, we are seeing firms and countries that are able to align with these requirements, who can demonstrate traceability, who can meet certification standards, and integrate sustainability with their production system. On the other side, we are seeing some businesses who may not have that power to become to integrate some of these sustainability compliance standards into their operation. And so they risk being excluded from high value segments of global trade, regardless of how competitive their cost of production is. So in a but more strategic dimension to this shift. We see that if we approach sustainability compliance deliberately, we may not only view it as a constraint, like we have always portrayed. It can actually become a source of market differentiation, a source of investment attraction, and long-term competitiveness. And that is the central question we are exploring on this webinar today. That is to say, how can African cotton, textile, and apparel stakeholders move from struggling with compliance to leveraging compliance as a strategic advantage in global trade? So today's discussion, we are building directly on our previous session, the one we held in March, where we examined the structure and dynamics of Africa's CTA trade. today in this webinar, we are moving one step further. We are moving from understanding the market to understanding what it takes to participate in that market. As always, our objective here at the Africa CTA Center is to support these conversations, support these developments with data-driven insights and practical policy relevant analysis that can inform decisions across government, across industry, and across the investment community. With that, I would invite my colleague, Favor Okereke, to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker would help us to unpack the current state of sustainability compliance in African CTA trade. Over to you, Favor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our first speaker for today is Mr. Simon Fregno. He is a writer and a research specialist in cotton and sustainability, currently based in the UK. He grew up in rural province where he worked on farms and trained as a chef in the 1980s, including time on organic farm. Earlier experience with industry irrigated agriculture and the increasing use of palm oil in catering, alongside his involvement with the UNESCO Club, deepening his awareness of environmental and social issues. His engagement in community initiatives include volunteering at a local FM radio station during France's period of liberalized broadcasting, and his proposed to the rise of the Front National, further shaping his perspective on social justice and sustainability. After developing a back problem, Simon moved to the UK to continue his studies. He went on to work with the International Institute for Environment and Development and Pesticide Action Network UK before becoming an independent consultant. In this capacity, he has collaborated with partners across Africa on a range of sustainability and development projects. Simon is now a regular contributor to Textile News and continues to advise NGOs and brands, including his work with Cotton Diaries. His research has taken him across Africa, Central Asia, India, Turkey, and South Africa. He is particularly focused on driving urgent action on climate change and supporting communities that are most affected by its impact, despite contributing to the least to the crisis. Let's join me welcome Mr. Simon. Over to you, Mr. Simon.
Thank you so much, Favor, and a big thank you to Aries Akola and ITRC for inviting me to this session. I'm just going to share my screen and my presentation. Hoping everybody can see my screen okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you for that introduction. So I think you've said everything that needs to be said. So yes, I primarily work at the moment with Cotton Diaries, which is an organization that looks to transform cotton from the ground up, and Eco Textile News, where I write about cotton and climate change. So I wanted to focus a little bit, not just on the compliance gaps, but on the years that I've been traveling and working with colleagues in Africa, the excellent work that already exists. I want to highlight some examples and the opportunities that I think are there for the taking. So to start with, when question comes up about compliance gaps, to my mind, there may not be compliance gaps so much as Africa always sadly suffers from a perception gap, which is people assume that for whatever reasons that it may be harder to do things than in other regions. But there's also, from research I've done in the past, I've just not done it yet. And that problem is not from the African business side, it's often from the brands side. That's and the particular example there is some work I did with ITC a few years back, looking at sustainability investments in manufacturing, particularly in North Africa. most of the factories in places like Tunisia are ready to make investments, but they're not getting the signals from the market to say, we're ready for you to do this. That said, I will come to an example in a minute of a factory that has already done some changes in Africa. But I'd also just like to highlight, and I know our other speaker will probably touch on that as well, but there's already a huge amount of compliance on sustainability requirements in Africa, particularly on the farming side. Some of the best organic cotton projects you will find anywhere are in Africa. The very first visit Fairtrade made to look at a standard for textiles was to Africa. I know because I was on that trip. That first picture on my first slide was from that trip in 2003 in Senegal. Cotton made in Africa obviously was developed with a particular focus on smallholders in Africa. So there's a lot there, and there's innovation already on heat adaptation, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the readiness, I think, is there. There is a huge amount. So the delay in investments, as I mentioned, it can be because clients are not ready. And so the problem may be at the buying end, which is people may not be willing to make the investments. They may hesitate. They may feel their customers in the retail market are not ready yet. Another common problem, though, of course, is that regulators are always regulating and they're shifting the goalposts. So we have new legislation coming in all the time. The EU has a lot coming on stream with the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, product environmental footprints, forced labour requirements, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, some of which may be generally intended to help improve the supply chain, some of which can be perceived or may be actual trade barriers trying to protect the European retailers. But an area, of course, that's waiting for nobody is climate change. And regulation may not be moving fast enough. That may be where there are opportunities for African countries and businesses to take a lead. And again, I'll come to that example. So there may be things that can be done because there are risks. So my first example of compliance readiness is this factory in Ghana that was highlighted in a panel I was on a couple of years ago, Ethical Apparel in Ghana. They have installed solar panels across the factory to power cooling systems on the factory floor because they were realizing that it was becoming impossible for workers to be productive in the growing heat conditions from climate change. So they installed water sources and an air-conditioned rest area provided to help people recover during their rest breaks, take a break, get their body temperature back down, because the risk, and the map I have on this page just shows that was in 2024. I just put all the data on all the climate events recorded that year because the capacity to attribute climate change and particular incidents of flooding, heat, and so on, excess rainfall or drought, is growing. And you can see on the map of Africa that West and Eastern Africa are particularly at risk from climate change. So there's a huge amount of adaptation that's needed. But again, making the right investments now can make a business more attractive because it's got the capacity to adapt and keep functioning during heat events. The other country I want to highlight, because I know it well, but also they show the value of integrated long-term approaches integrated with supportive policy, because Benin has gone from being one of the pioneers 30 years ago. This is the 30th anniversary of organic cotton in Benin this year. So in 1996, they started producing organic cotton supported by Pesticide Action Network in a very small scale. The last time I interviewed them, at the time the Glojigbe was being inaugurated, and Professor Vodoué, who was the founder, who leads OBEPAB, said Benin has all the standard, and it's true. All of the sustainable organic fair trade, cotton made in Africa, better cotton, are all present in Benin. The government, through different iterations, through different elections, has remained supportive of sustainable cotton, and that's brought in new actors. They hosted World Cotton Day 2024. This year, a researcher from Benin presented at the Bremen Cotton Conference talking about biochar as a way to sequester carbon in soils. Here we have again another example of innovation and investment in Africa that is a role model. So I think, and the investment in Logic Bay, which I think is around $500 million so far, where textiles and other commodity processing is all integrated in one place. From a farmer perspective, if you're growing cotton and you're also growing cashew and soya, having a single processing point for all of them means that business opportunities and so income opportunities for farmers are growing. So this factory is already making t-shirts, bed linen, towels, and so on. I believe several units in Benin are already certified to the GOT standard, which I'm sure Mukhtar will be talking about. The processing plant at Logic Bay has also got a deal to provide traceability. I'll talk about traceability again in a minute. And I think the total investment planned is $1.4 billion, so it's significant. This really shows what is possible. And as you develop customs unions across West Africa, then I think the potential is enormous. And I believe, again, Logic Bay has also got integrated offices for supporting all of the administration requirements on certifications, registration, export documentation. So a really good example. And just briefly, because I'm conscious of time passing, lots of innovation in places like Egypt. I saw waterless dyeing being developed by universities there. There's been incredible work being done in Tanzania with manufacturing. Mantis World is a well-known brand in the organic cotton world. Woolworths in South Africa is a retail brand, did quite a lot a few years back looking to source from other countries in the region. And something we did, I'll come back to traceability, about 10 years ago, we did some trials of how easy it might be to send data for traceability from the field. So the picture at the bottom in the middle was us testing, sending a message by text to a server in the UK, and then seeing the data appear on the screen within a few seconds. So we know traceability is also possible, as is innovation. But as I mentioned, the compliance landscape can be very, very complicated and off-putting when you don't know, and that's where some of the gaps may appear and where there's a need for governments, policymakers, and others to support businesses, which is providing information on the requirements, training, so that people understand what they're asked to do, how to do it, how to document it, and how to keep up with the changes, because we have farming standards, industrial standards, voluntary standards on due diligence or ethical trading, government requirements, particularly from the EU, United Nations requirements on labor, chemicals, and so on, and increasingly demands for traceability. So traceability is one of the big ones that can be a little bit hard to understand and may not always be legislated for, although there are international standards, but it's basically recording all the processes within an organization, the production of inputs, the inputs, how the inputs are received and recorded, processed and shipped. So who does what, when, where, and why. The thing to say in, say, farming, which is the area I know best, the data is usually there, but it may still be on paper, it may not be digitized, there may be no investment in it, but we do know there is an awful lot of information about what people do, the plots of lands they do it on, and particularly in organic fair trade, CMIA, better cotton, all of the information is recorded, but producer groups in conventional cotton are probably recording things as well. But most of the standards are going to require a chain of custody at some point. And that means guaranteeing the product that enters is the same as the product that leaves, and what's happened to it along the way, taking into account any wastages or losses or rejections as it goes. So I want to summarize just to finish where I see things at the moment on the in the various countries of Africa that I'm familiar with, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I think there's, as I mentioned, a huge amount of experience in certifications. There may be existing regulations in a lot of country that can be taken advantage of to build, including building domestic standards and regulations, which could include anticipating in areas like climate change legislation that may be coming in other countries and being able to say, hang on, we already have something, say, regulating how we manage heat in factories. A lot of cotton production countries still have very strong extension research systems. They may be underinvested, but there's a lot of knowledge and capacity in those, and that's another strength. And proximity to market, and I think what's happening at the moment in the Gulf Straits of Hormuz says, actually, if you have capacity to ship to Europe, South America, or North America without passing by there, that's probably something to take advantage of. That said, transport linkages can still be a little bit difficult in between countries in particular, but I think that can improve, particularly with customs unions, energy infrastructure. And again, I believe there's a lot of investment going on in solar in particular, and that can mitigate that. Access to finance can be a real problem. The need to train, support training, education, and knowledge around certification standards is a problem. Degraded lands, chemicals misuse, illegal trade. So some of the opportunities to build something from scratch, as Africa has shown with the growth of mobile technology and apps development and so on, sometimes you can bypass stages of growth and development and jump straight to the latest. And I think that's something to look for with certain areas like energy, developing homegrown human rights and environment due diligence requirements and regulations, which could be unique but aligned with others. And I think they can be more believable than, say, China's, which everybody knows, sort of China's sustainable cotton standards to a large degree are there to greenwash what's happening with forced labor transfers and so on. So I think having African developed in different countries or across the African Union standards aligned with the EU, but then maybe go further in some areas could be an opportunity to develop value addition. The land and the people resources in Africa are incredible. And so is the opportunity to develop regional and continental supply chains. The threats can be costs, which can be higher than Asia at the moment. Competition, obviously, from China, India, and Asia, which is cheaper. Perceptions, again, outside perceptions, which don't match the reality around corruption or child labor. So it's important to be able to communicate what's being done to address problems if they're real, or to explain that those problems are not real. Climate change is an obvious threat. I am coming to the end as well, thank you. And constantly changing legislation. So with that, thank you. I think I've managed to actually keep in the 15 minutes. So I'll be ready for questions later on.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Simon. You did manage to keep it under 15 minutes, and that's incredible of you to do. I understand there's so many insights that you have packed into that presentation, and if we were to go into all of those in details, we might be here an hour, and we have not even covered up to 50% of it. And so yeah, so thank you again for sharing that that thought-provoking presentation. Just before I do a quick synopsis of Simon's presentation, so I want to add that for participants, we are going to be having a Q&A session at the end of the speakers' presentations. And so we have a dedicated Q&A chat box over there that you can drop all of your questions. And as you are dropping the questions, please also indicate which of the speakers you are directing your question to. Okay, so that will help us to harmonize the questions properly. I think we're having up to 30 minutes of Q&A, so there's so much time for us to deal with all of the questions today. So please take your time to drop your questions in the Q&A chat box, and and we'll be sure to take every one of them as we go on. Thank you. Yes, so again, thank you very, very much for that insightful presentation, Simon. For me, something pricked in my heart, and it makes me to begin to question the common assumption that we have had in Africa for a while now, to say maybe we don't have the capacity to develop or to even meet the trade compliance standards. And what we have just heard is that the reality is that Africa is actually doing well when it comes to meeting the standards of compliance. And so I want to quickly highlight a few insights that I picked from the presentation. And so the number one for me would be that the issue is not an outright absence of compliance, but maybe a fragmented and an uneven readiness landscape. Okay, so for instance, we already have significant experience with certification and sustainability standards, including, just like Simon mentioned, organic cotton, the cotton made in Africa, the fair trade. And so in many cases, even at the farming level, there are systems and practices that are already in place. Okay. Secondly, compliance is not only a supplier challenge, it's also shaped by buyer readiness and shifting regulatory frameworks. And this is very eye-opening for me. Simon raised an important point that the delays in investment and compliance progression are not always driven by the African producers. In some cases, global buyers themselves are still adapting to evolving requirements. Okay. So regulatory environments, they continue to shift rapidly. So we are seeing new frameworks being rolled out almost on a monthly basis. And so the compliance itself is not a fixed standard, but an evolving process. So the target keeps shifting. So even when you say you have met a standard today, in the next 6 months, there are maybe two or three more standards that are waiting for you to meet. So the standards keep evolving, and then you find yourself as a supplier trying to put yourself in a race where you are trying to meet up with as many standards as possible. And that is a very eye-opening one for me. Thirdly, Simon also mentioned that we already have practical examples of compliance-led progress across the continent. He mentioned Benin and Ghana. And I have a very strategic question concerning the Benin case, which I'll be dropping, when we get to the Q&A. So for me, it shows that there are indications that compliance can be operationalized in the African context. And so that begs the question, what does it take, okay, to actually scale from one country in Benin to maybe even a region like West Africa, and then maybe to other regions. So we'll be looking at all of that later. So, but as I round up with the synopsis, so for me, what does this, all of these insights mean for Africa? One, it suggests that the challenge is not just to achieve compliance, but to demonstrate it consistently at scale and, of course, with credibility. It also enforces that compliance should not be treated as a standalone requirement, but as part of a broader system that is linked to infrastructure, industrial capacity, and trade integration. And perhaps most importantly for me is, it highlights a strategic opportunity, because in a context where global standards are still evolving, then it means there is a space for African countries to build compliance systems from the ground up, just like Simon mentioned, that is aligned with global expectations, but tailored to local realities in Africa here. So that is an avenue where I think we might have to focus our attention more in the African context. So in summary, compliance does exist in Africa, and so the real question is, how do we move from pockets of compliance, as we have seen, to system-wide readiness that can support competitive participation in global trade? And that is a question that we're going to be looking at in the next stage of our discussion. And so again, I'm going to be inviting Favor to introduce our second speaker for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second speaker for today is Mr. Mukhtar Dodo. He's a sustainability and certified specialist working at the inception of Africa's cotton and textile industry and global trade. He focuses on aligning regional industries with global sustainability standards to unlock international market access, expand cross-border trade opportunities, and strengthen competitiveness within global value chains. His expertise centers on advancing compliance with regional sustainability benchmarks, enabling Africa producers to meet enabling or evolving market requirements while strengthening supply chain integrity and reducing trade-related risks. Committed to equity economic growth, Muqtad works to bridge gaps between African cotton industries and global buyers by advocating for fair trade practices and leveraging certification as a strategic tool for trade facilitation and resilience. His work underscores the role of sustainability standards not just as compliance requirements, but as a catalyst for market expansion, social, environmental impact, and deeper integration for Africa into the global textile economy. Join me as I welcome Mr. Mukhtar Dodo. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Favor, for the introduction. Thank you, ICRC, for the invitation to be a speaker at this event. Topic, not just to me, but to the continental CTA industry. As we all know, certifications used to be voluntary, but now they've become more or less mandatory due to regulations in destination markets. So it's becoming more and more important for African textile industry players that would want to participate in the global space to become certified at least. So I would like to begin my presentation. I hope my screen is visible.
Oh, yes, yes, it is.
Thank you very much. So setting the context, sustainability compliance is accelerating. It is mostly driven by the global north, usually the EU and the United States. These are the markets that have been at the forefront of sustainability compliance requirements and regulations. Since 2019, there has been the EU Green Deal. There's been the EU Circular Economy Action Plan in 2020, and then the EU's Strategy for Sustainable and Circular and Sustainable Textiles in 2022. So these sustainability requirements have expanded rapidly across global markets, transforming compliance from a voluntary choice into a market access condition. I know the EU especially has a target by 2030. You have to be able to prove your green claims before your product can enter the EU market, and this is where certifications become very important, because certification is more or less the only assurance you could give to a buyer or a consumer that your product meets certain requirements of the destination market. So it's no longer an issue about being voluntary. We call it VSS. These things are becoming more and more mandatory as long as you would like to play in that in the global market. So then the current textile trajectory is unsustainable. Yes, these regulations that have dictated certifications are not just gatekeeping mechanisms. No, they are being informed by actual realities on ground in the textile industry. As we all know, the textile industry is the third highest polluting industry in the world after oil and gas and transportation. Textile comes third. There is also issues of social human rights abuses in the textile industry. And this affects not just textile workers, but also even the safety of the final consumer. So you find products being made with unsafe chemicals. You find the person processing that product in the factory is at risk. The final consumer, person wearing that product, is also at risk. So most of these regulations are born out of necessity rather than gatekeeping. So despite progress, environmental, climate, and social impacts continue to rise, creating regulatory, reputational, and supply chain risks for companies and sourcing regions. According to the UNFCCC, the textile industry is still responsible for 5 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. So the textile industry is a large industry. African textile industry might not be there yet, but definitely we have the opportunity to build up better at the moment. Then voluntary sustainability standards enable compliance. Yes, as I just said earlier, leading companies increasingly rely on credible VSS. I think this acronym needs to be changed because it's no longer voluntary, more or less, such as the Global Organic Textile Standard GOTS, to identify risks, manage complex supply chains, and demonstrate verifiable sustainability performance. Yeah, so this is the only assurance that a buyer has, because when sourcing offices are out there trying to source for suppliers, risks are very important. And one of the ways they screen out highly risk, they reduce the risk in their supply chain is by looking at the certifications you hold and what criteria is this certification covering. Some certifications cover one aspect, maybe environmental, others cover social, others cover due diligence, which is your second tier, third tier suppliers. Others cover production, fiber production, for instance, organic cotton. So these are holistic, there are holistic certifications out there that kind of reduces the burden as well for companies. And I'd like to say this because I'm not trying to discount the fact that some certifications focus on specific areas, but there is the risk of certification fatigue on the part of the industry, whereby you are burdened with taking on so many certifications, whereas you could have a single certification that could cover a wide range of areas. Like for instance, GOTS covers environmental, social, due diligence, and it doesn't cover the farming activities, but organic cotton or organic fiber is a requirement. So certification delivers compliance. Certifications such as GOTS support legal compliance while going beyond minimum requirements through science-based, robust, and verifiable criteria across the entire value chain from farm to finished product. Yes, so if we are having textile companies listening in, it's always important to research and find out, okay, which of the certifications work best for you, and which certification is able or can enable your facilities comply with certain regulations. Some certifications can help you comply with more than one regulation, while others can maybe probably just help you comply to a single regulation. So I think it's always better to have a holistic approach whereby you look at what are the risks, what regulations apply to your production or process or product criteria, and see what certification can meet up with more than just one of that criteria. I think that's also an aspect of sustainability, because if you take on so many certifications, you might not be able to maintain it at the end of the day, because this costs money, it costs time, it costs resources. So from obligation to strategic advantage, by combining regulatory alignment, traceability, and continuous improvement, certifications do enable companies and sourcing regions to meet today's rules while positioning for future requirements. Yes, Africa is not as polluted as other parts of the world, but at the same time, we cannot make self-claims. Self-claims are considered to be greenwashing in the industry. So yes, certification is still the only way to provide assurance to your customers and to the final consumer. Compliance imperative. So compliance is no longer optional. We can't say this enough. Mandatory sustainability compliance. Global markets require verified sustainability compliance for participation, embedding environmental and human rights due diligence. Sustainability marked products now hold 18.5% market share, up from 13.7% in 2015. That's within a decade. The products achieved a 5-year compound annual growth rate of 9.9%, outperforming conventionally marked products at 6.4%. This is a research by the New York University Stern School of Business. And this is not just for textiles, this is for all consumer products, including cosmetics and food as well. So as we move forward, as people are much more aware, definitely this trend will continue to be seen growing worldwide. It used to be only in the developed economies, I would say, but now it's a trend that is moving into Asia. More and more people in Asia are demanding for sustainable products, and eventually Africa would also take part. I've seen this happening in South Africa. We already have people who only consume halal, which is a form of certification, a form of sustainability, because it includes social compliance. We are seeing people in the fashion industry as well in Africa understanding that they need to consume less, they need to keep their products for longer. So the awareness is increasing gradually. So eventually, as we move forward into the future, sustainability claims and certifications would be important to every business that wants to survive. Impact on African CTA actors. African producers must provide credible evidence of responsible production to access export markets. 59% of surveyed certified entities said GOTS certification increased their business opportunities. I would have to make reference to GOTS because this is where I work and this is the data I'm quite familiar with and I can vouch for. So this is it. So for sometimes you hear the argument by textile companies like it's a chicken and egg situation. Do we get certified first or wait to till we have an order for a certified product before we get certified? And the answer I usually give them is opportunity comes to those who are prepared. Certification is not just for you to prove to your customers that you're doing the right thing. It's also an internal control mechanism to ensure that your own supply chain is clean. For instance, if you're a dyeing business, you're a dyeing operation, whereby you dye or print on textile products, it's important for you to know where your chemicals are coming from, how safe are those chemicals, are they toxic or non-toxic, how does it affect your workers first of all, and then how does it affect your the consumer at the end of the day, and then the product life cycle as well. When this product comes to the end of life and goes back into the earth or it's discarded somewhere, how does it affect the flora and fauna? If this ends up in the sea, how does it affect animal life and plant life in the sea? So these are things that are very important. So for businesses that are contemplating whether to get certified or not, I think it's always the best criteria to become certified and then look for the market, because it's the most responsible thing to do. It shows concern, it shows commitment. It's not just financial advantages you're looking out for, but you're also looking out and proving that, yes, you are truly committed to the environment and to social responsibility. Then supply chain-wide expectations. Sustainability requirements cascade down to SMEs and producers, shaping competitiveness and risk management. And this, I believe, is something that's very important in Africa. We have so many businesses that qualify as SMEs, some small and medium enterprises. We have certifications that cater to these kinds of businesses, whereby a group certification might be possible, which is very important. I think Africa needs to prioritize certification schemes that offer group certification, because this lifts off the burden of cost, administrative burdens, and other things like that, especially for SMEs. So I think our businesses and our policymakers should prioritize certification schemes that encourage group certification. Then 91% of large brands and retailers require sustainability certifications from their suppliers, which is what I said earlier. So you shouldn't wait for the demand to come. You should be certified and be ready. 60% of small and medium-sized brands and retailers require such certifications, and this cuts across the entire supply chain. So it doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to be making the end product. Even if you're at the beginning, for instance, you're a genie operator, or you're what do you call it? A packaging company. Whatever it is, wherever you are within the supply chain, it's important that you consider what certifications do I need to prove that I am a responsible business, that I'm not making self-claims. Africa's structural challenges. Where the gaps exist in Africa's CTA value chain. High compliance costs. Yes, some of these certifications are not cheap, which is why I mentioned earlier the opportunity to have group certification. So certification and audit costs are disproportionately high for small and medium firms, hindering sustainability compliance. I would come to this much later. There are many factors involved. For instance, we do lack indigenous certification bodies. For instance, when you speak of ISO Type 1 standards that require third-party certification bodies, you realize most of these third-party certification bodies are not African, or they are not based here on the continent. And this adds to the cost of certification, because auditors would have to fly in from other parts of the world, and they might see operations with a different eye rather than with the African eye. So this all adds up to costs. Then we have fragmented supply chains. Supply chains are often informal and fragmented, involving many intermediaries, complicating traceability and oversight. This is something that's not particular to Africa. Yes, the global textile industry is quite fragmented, but not informal. Africa's is quite informal. You find companies in China having to buy certified organic cotton, maybe from Tanzania, spinning and weaving in China, and then moving the fabric back to Ethiopia, where it is made into a garment that is then shipped to Europe or North America. So yes, the supply chain is quite fragmented, but then we have certification schemes and chain of custody instruments that ensure the products are moving in an appropriate and responsible manner, whereby there are no false claims involved. So integrity is quite important, and you can't achieve this if you don't have a certification scheme that has built this system into your operations. Then we have limited data access and traceability, lack of reliable data systems, and weak product traceability from raw material to finished goods limit compliance. Just as like I saw in the first presenter, Simon, he showed us a picture of a group of people trying to send a text message from a farm, I think in Benin. So yes, data is quite an issue, and I think one of the advantages of having a certification is because it establishes data collection. You have to keep records. Records play a huge part in compliance and audits and certification at the end of the day. So when you subscribe to a certification scheme, you definitely need to keep records. So data is gathered, data is useful, and it doesn't have to be a high-level certification scheme. Even the ISO quality management system is a system that ensures businesses have quality management schemes built into the operations. So data is also part of it. EMS, environmental management system as well. So these are some of the advantages. It helps put processes in place. Need for coordinated solutions. System-level solutions are needed to address cost, capacity, and complexity beyond individual firm compliance. Yes, as I said, group certifications are very important. Yes, you might have, for instance, we have the CSCS in GOTS, which was launched in Japan. It was trialed in Japan and has been launched worldwide right now. So it's called Control Supply Chain Certification Scheme, whereby a minimum of 8 and a maximum of 20 SMEs, small and medium enterprises, could come together and apply for a certification. And they'll have to establish internal control systems within to ensure that each member of the group is complying and doing the right thing. So I think these are some of the innovations that are very important in Africa to make it work, by ensuring that businesses do not take on the huge burden of costs and administration all by themselves. Businesses could collaborate on sustainability and compete on creativity. So nobody is really hindering the other. But then again, it's an advantage at the end of the day that helps everyone involved. Enabling compliance. So effective compliance support what works? Participation, focused compliance. African voices are needed in standard review and public consultation. Most standards in the world, most certifications are built on standards like the CMIA, Cotton Made in Africa, Global Organic Textile Standard. We will be having a new standard as well, GRTS, Global Responsible Textile Standard. So most certifications are built on standards, and it's a requirement for a standard to have input from stakeholders, and these stakeholders could include the industry, academia, consumer groups. Everyone has a voice. Everyone is required to make input in the development of a standard. So I think African voices are needed more in standard review and public consultation. So when a standard is being developed, we have experts on the continent who need to be a part of these discussions, whereby our own what do you call it? Our own peculiarities are involved. For instance, the debate of child labor. For some people, child labor is unacceptable, while for others, what is considered to be child labor is informal education. So it's a process of skills transfer. A child could be able to read and write, but at the same time, they're required to come onto the farms or to go into the workshops and work with their parents so that they can transfer certain skills, and this becomes their own means of livelihood in the future. So these are some of the nuances that are kind of missing in global certification schemes. African voices need to be heard, and African voices need to participate. And the good thing about this is that most standard review and public consultations are open to everyone. So it's just a matter of looking at the industry putting itself together, prioritizing what schemes are important, and seeing how they can participate in this standard review. That's why we have global in the Global Organic Textile Standard. That global means global voices. Everyone is welcome in the development of the standard and in the certification as well. So it's one certification for the entire for the whole market, I would say. And the risk-based certification models. As I said earlier, type 1 certifications, such as Global Organic Textile Standards, are voluntary. Third-party eco-labels and that verify a product's compliance with strict, comprehensive environmental and social criteria throughout its entire life cycle. So for GOTS, the entire supply chain has to be checked, which is where traceability comes in. So from wherever a product is coming from, in whichever part of the world, it's accompanied by a transaction certificate, which tells you what quantity of product it is, the product description, and everything involved. So there isn't, the fact that the industry is fragmented does not mean that you cannot play in the industry, and which is why I highlighted earlier that Africa, yes, it is fragmented, but the main challenge is not the fragmentation, rather the informal nature of the industry, whereby we do not have records to accompany products and the traceability cannot be ensured. So far, we have 5.6 billion workers working in GOTS certified. Yes, I'm sorry, I cannot see you.
Okay, your time is actually spent. Maybe you could just take another 1 or 2 minutes to round up your thoughts. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll just round up in the next 2 minutes. So we have currently 5.6 million workers working in GOTS certified facilities worldwide, Africa inclusive, and this is a 15.3% increase in certified facilities between 2024 and 2025. That's showing that certifications are really catching on. And if companies fail to get certified, they would be left out of the business. And for brands and sourcing agents, these are some of the things that gives them confidence that the supply chain they are going into is not a risky supply chain. It has been de-risked. So support for SMEs, I've already said that group certifications are very important. And then transparency and trust, also built on by certifications. Capacity as strategic investment. So building capacity, not just auditing. As I said earlier, you shouldn't be preparing for audits, but rather you should build systems that are responsible, that keep records, that keep data, and that ensure that your internal quality management system is globally competitive. And then traceability, as I said, we have traceability tools like the transaction certificate that accompanies every product. If a product is finally got certified, it carries a barcode and a QR code, whereby you can scan this barcode and QR code to trace the product in the supply chain to find out where it's coming from and who has been involved in the making of that product. These are things that you cannot get without the certification in place. So competitive outcomes, from compliance to competitive advantage, enhance supplier credibility, yes, premium market access, transparency and trust, and digital showcasing tools. So these are some of the advantages that comes out of complying to voluntary sustainability standards and certifications. So the call to action, strategic compliance is very important. Risks of inaction, we cannot remain inactive at this moment. We have to get involved as Africa cotton textile and apparel industry. Opportunity through investment, you have to prepare, you have to get certified for you to capture the opportunities in the market. Call for coordination, policymakers, businesses, and partners must align to reduce costs, build capabilities, and expand inclusion in the CTA sector. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. I'm sorry for taking longer than expected.
You're muted, sir.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so thank you, Mukhtar. I did mention earlier that the data that is packed into these presentations are quite deep and complex. I know if we were to go into each of them, we might be spending 2-3 hours here, and we have not even covered up to 50% of them. All right. So thank you again, Mukhtar. I would quickly also take a synopsis from Mukhtar's presentation. And before that, I also want to mention again that we are encouraged to, I'm seeing a couple of questions in the regular chat box, but there is a dedicated Q&A chat box. So please endeavor to put your questions in the dedicated Q&A chat box. Please, we'll be going, after this synopsis, we'll be going into the Q&A section. So let's drop our questions in and also indicate which of the speakers we are directing our questions to. Thank you. Again, thank you, Mukhtar, for the highly structured and practical presentation. For me, what I picked from here is like bringing the broad understanding of sustainability requirements into something that is much more concrete, and that is what it actually takes to, operationalize compliance within the Africa CTA sector. We saw that compliance challenge in Africa is also something is fundamentally structural. We saw earlier that it was also something that was also coming from the compliance fatigue. Mukhtar helped me to define that into an industry term. Okay, so secondly, we saw that addressing compliance requires coordinated system-level solutions. So mechanisms such as group certification, risk-based models, and more inclusive standard setting processes, are critical in lowering the barriers to entry and ensuring broader participation. For me, I'm actually very much interested in having that inclusive voices in setting up these standards, particularly. And I have a question for Mukhtar regarding how, you did mention that the calls to set up this, to develop these standards are actually open to all. And so the question is, how do the stakeholders get into those conversations? So we'll be getting into all of that in a few minutes from now. Mukhtar also mentioned about capacity building to be treated as a strategic investment, not just a compliance obligation. For me, that suggests that compliance readiness is directly linked to long-term industrial competitiveness. And then traceability, something very important for us is that for us to develop, to get to that system-wide, ecosystem-wide compliance, digital traceability is actually, it offers a pathway to scale, to build trust and to build trust with buyers and regulators. So for me, all of this reinforce that the pathway forward is building smarter, more inclusive, and the emphasis on more inclusive compliance system from the outset, building from the ground up, like I said earlier, something that is that aligns with global standards, but is also tailored to our local realities here. And so perhaps most importantly for us to understand here from Mukhtar's presentation is that those who actually invest early in capacity, early in coordination, and they invest early in traceability will not only be complying, they will be setting up themselves for competitiveness, competitive advantage in the market. So I'm particularly taking away the fact that because I had that discussion also with a supplier who was asking the chicken and egg question. So should we get our certifications before we get orders, or which one comes first? And so that's a big takeaway for me from Mukhtar's presentation. So that brings us to the Q&A section, and I'll be inviting a colleague of mine again, that is Matthew Toromade, who would moderate the Q&A session. Matthew, over to you. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mariana, for the questions, and thank you, Matthew, for the summary. So I am not aware of any movements so far, but we do know that there are routes for those opportunities to take. Something that regularly comes up for me is people from Turkey saying, do you know of any cotton available in West Africa, usually sustainable cotton? Because that trade route exists and it does not pass via the Strait of Hormuz. So I think something that, and this may be a government level one as well as a business level one, which is talk to Turkey about maybe having some regular formal arrangements to make it easier for people to ship cotton from West Africa to Turkey. I think that's one opportunity that exists. There are also routes to places like Portugal, which still has some textile manufacturing. Again, people will be looking from west to North Africa is another route that has opportunities, including, for example, the Egyptian industry increasingly is looking for medium staple cottons and not only long staple cottons, which they cannot supply by themselves. So there's another opportunity there for other African countries to step in and say, we can supply you with very good quality West African cotton, including certified sustainable cottons. So that there are obvious opportunities to develop. And I think that's in terms of new ones, then I think that looking at the transatlantic routes to countries like Brazil, which again, it does produce cotton, but it also has a textile industry. What are the opportunities for individual countries or the African Union to speak to Brazil or to speak to Mercer and say, how can transatlantic trade easier? And I think that's an obvious one. It happens in music. Why shouldn't it happen in textiles? Yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. It does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are several ways it can do it. Yeah, am I ready to start? Okay. Yeah. So I think it can act in several ways. So there may be people who are already versed with how to do traceability, but for a lot of producers, suppliers, whether they be producer groups or textile industries or genuine factories who are more used to working in the local markets, a regional traceability system is a good training ground for how to meet international requirements by starting at a regional level, and that can be integrated with developing regional markets as well. So I think it's a training ground. It's an opportunity to learn also how to develop a policy at a regional level. And it can be aligned so that it's easy for people who've met the regional standard to then meet any international requirements that may come later on. I hope that answers the question. And it can also be a way, of course, for countries to develop the tax collection or regulatory systems that go around traceability. So making sure that you know what's moving where, that people are paying the right dues, have the right paperwork. And again, that becomes the habit of doing business in a way that is expected across the world and within the African continent as well. But it also, developing those markets and systems means that you are developing inter-border and inter-regional trade, so you're reducing the vulnerability or dependence on international markets as well. There may also be opportunities to develop world-leading systems. I mentioned the development of mobile apps in Africa, which we know has been very innovative. Why shouldn't there be development of traceability providers through such initiatives that can go on to work and compete worldwide? Because again, we know in Africa the skills are there. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you so much for moderating that. I see Sylvester, you have your hands raised. You want to have a question, you can unmute yourself to ask your question, and then we take it from there. Sylvester.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Sylvester Kazi. I'm speaking from Tanzania, representing A to Z group of companies. And we've been in textile for some decades. My question here, of course, my apologies for joining late. I was experiencing some challenges in joining because the Microsoft team was not opening for me. So I came quite late actually at the time Mr. Dodo was almost finishing his presentation. But I just wanted to ask one or two questions regarding standards that we've been talking about the textile garment standards that just wanted to know. I'm not sure, maybe it has been presented earlier before I joined, but just to understand if we're going to have our own regional standards for garments and textiles, and if that's so, are these going to be developed? There are national players regionally, for example, economic blocks like East Africa. We have existing garments and textile. For looking even outside the region, our own business to business in the partner states. What standards are we going to use? Are we going to develop regional standards, or we are going to use the existing national or economic bloc standards? Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvester. Mukhtar, I would like you to take that question, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sylvester. As you said, yes, we already have national standards. Most countries have their own national standard bodies, and then we also have the Africa Organization for Standardization, which is also, I think, headquartered in Nairobi, in Kenya. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
yes, sure.
So I know that there have been some efforts to harmonize certain standards, especially in the face of the AFCFTA, so that standards from different countries could have mutual recognition. These are standards that have not yet been harmonized, and those that have been harmonized, whereby the standards are standalone standards that each country could aspire to comply to. So that's a step. But then at the global level, we have standards for quality parameters, which are universal. They are globally recognized. You find that most quality specification standards are the same globally. When we speak of voluntary sustainability standards, these are standards that enumerate environmental and social criteria. They are also similarly becoming globally the same. For instance, the one I know very well, GOTS, it's one standard all over the world. So yes, it all depends on the certification scheme owners. And as I said in my presentation, the parties involved in developing the standard also play a role. So if, for instance, ARSO decides to take part in the development of a new globally recognized sustainability standard and brings in requirements that most African textile manufacturers feel they can comply with, then that standard stands alone and will be accepted in all Africa by all African markets. So it's a staggered process. It has not yet been finalized, but I think as we move forward, national standards will remain relevant, regional standards will remain relevant, and then also global standards would remain relevant. So we would see the standards coexisting together. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Dodo, for the explanation. That's fine. That's quite understood. Because I understand for the global, we are also exporting outside Africa. And of course, there are very strict compliances that we have to meet. For example, when we are doing for America, you have to meet the RAP requirements and other kind of, even if you might have an ISO, still you have to comply with their requirements. But again, we have seen also, especially for the EU market, yeah, there is now carbon footprint and this kind of compliances which need be actually needed to be taken into consideration when producing for those markets. Yeah. So, yeah, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Sylvester and Mukhtar. I also want to take that a bit further, that question on standards and, I did mention earlier that I was going to take you up on that, Mukhtar. So, yes, so we have national standards here in Africa. We have regional standards here in Africa. And just like Sylvester mentioned just now, we are producing majorly for export into EU, into America. And so we are more or less, inclined, okay, to meet up with their own standards. All right. Now, you mentioned that it is important for Africa to participate in setting those standard processes. So at the processes of setting those standards, you mentioned that it is important for Africa to participate in developing those standards. So now my question is, realistically, how realistic is it? So how can African stakeholders become more influential in shaping these global compliance frameworks, rather than just responding to them, rather than conforming to them? Okay, so yes, I also mentioned that you said it's actually open to all. So now, are there existing platforms or mechanisms where we should be engaging more actively so that our voices will be heard in the processes of setting up these standards?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. For instance, right now we have a new standard that's been released before the end of the year. It's called Global Responsible Textile Standard. If you go on our website, you will see that there's a public consultation that's currently open. It ends on the 30th of April. So every stakeholder that has something to add to it, if you are a textile processor, if you are a regulatory body, a national regulatory body, you could go to the webpage and look at the standard and see areas where you can make your contributions, and all contributions will be duly noted. So that's one aspect of it. On the market level, we have to identify and avoid what I said in my presentation, certification fatigue. There are certain certifications that that the compliance requires the same set of data, the same set of concerns, the same set of risks. And there is no reason why, being an African textile operator, you comply to a social compliance standard 1, social compliance standard 2, social compliance standard 3, just simply because the market is demanding for that. Which is why I said in my presentation, we'll always have to look at this standard holistically and see which standard meets my own needs first. What does it tackle? What are my risks? After you make your own risk assessments, look at the standard that could take care of those risks. Because when we look at the regulations in the global markets, most of the regulations are informed based on risks that are in the market. So they are not just being formed out of thin air. They are formed to tackle some of those risks and concerns. So as an operator, that's where to start from. And then I also mentioned that there needs to be collaboration on sustainability. The industry bodies need to come together and look at what are some of the standards that they would like to have. For instance, I know that when we speak of organic certifications, we have the EU, we have the NOP, which is the American standard, we have the Indian standard as well. We also have the East African organic standard, organic agricultural standards. These are standards that have been recognized in the IFOAM family of standards. So when you are going to produce organic cotton based on East African standard or the EU standard or the NOP, it's viewed the same because it's all part of the IFOAM family of standards. IFOAM stands for International Federation of Organic Agricultural Movements. So I think some of these standard developers also need to reach out to global bodies whereby they would have their standards recognized under those schemes. So if I'm producing in Kenya or in Ethiopia, I do not need to obtain an EU certification. I could easily go with the East African Organic Agricultural Standard. So those are some of the mechanisms. It starts with the industry, I would say, from an individual level to an industry level to a national level and then regional level. Then it goes global, whereby you have international bodies like the IFOAM recognizing your standard and putting it at equal pedestal with other international standards of the same, same criteria. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, you did answer it perfectly. And where it gets interesting for me is, where. Okay, yes. So Mariana, you can go. So where it gets interesting for me is for we now, the regional standards that we have set for ourselves, for us to then reach out to some of these EU standards to make to get an alignment in terms of, okay, so we already have some of these things that our producers here have already met up with these standards, and these standards are the same. They are asking for the same criteria with yours over there. So now that these guys have this particular standard, they don't have to necessarily meet your standard. So there has to be some form of alignment, and if we can begin, then we can begin to position ourselves in shaping those conversations in global standards. Yeah, thank you very much. That answered my question very perfectly. I also have one question for
I think that's the
Simon.
keyword. Alignment is keyword.
Sorry, come again?
And I said that's the keyword. You got it right. Alignment.
Yeah,
alignment as long as the standards are aligned. Yes.
Alignment,
yes. So as long as the standards are aligned, so there's no point getting more than one certification of the same criteria.
Exactly. I agree. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm back to Simon. So, Simon, there was something you mentioned that pricked my heart, and that's Benin Republic celebrated 30 years, okay, of should I say farming organic cotton, okay? 30 years. Yes, 30 years. So that's something that is touching, okay? Now, what's marvelous for me there is to see that in those 30 years, plus or minus, Benin Republic have changed governments maybe 3, 4, 5 times. Okay. Now, how was it that each successive government was able to, sustain or even maintain the development of organic cotton in Benin? Because what we are familiar with, in Africa is you see a government come in, tries to do something, and within the 4 to 8 years while he is there, that policy is working. But as soon as he steps out and the new government comes in, there's sort of it is no outright abandonment of that particular policy. There's probably something that's going to alter it. Okay, so from your experience, from your research, from what you understand by that that Benin Republic, initiative, what do you think was key to sustaining that policy down the line for 30 years now and counting, if I may say?
So I think there's a number of factors, and obviously the people in Benin would be able to speak more than to me, but I think the network of the farmers and of the people in the NGO who promoted it have managed to build networks and connections with policymakers, with research, with trading companies to say this is important, what we're doing is important, and it transcends politics because it's economically beneficial. And this is why I think we were able to see the governments of Kérékou, then the one that came after, then Patrice Talon, have all said, we support organic cotton. It works for the farmers, but it's doing for, we're learning useful things on how to do cotton without chemicals, be less dependent on imports of chemicals, because, again, that's a point of vulnerability, particularly fertilizers. These are products that are influenced by what's happening politically in the Gulf. So being able to farm using local resources. So I think it's being able to show the benefits so that policymakers support it. So I think, yeah, it's really worth going to see, talking to the people in Benin. How did you do it? Because I think it is important, because as you say, so often you see a government come in and say, we're a new government, so we're going to throw out everything that it happens everywhere. It happens here in the UK just the same. People hate that another government has done something successful. So, and I think because cotton is so important to the Beninois economy, I think is why people have also done it. So, but it's a success story. And, you have to really look at how do you translate a success story to other countries to say,
Exactly.
This transcends party politics. And so, yeah, it's important. But I think it's networks. It's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so the basis of that question is to see how can we then, scale this from Benin to neighboring countries, even within West Africa, starting from West Africa. Benin is a cotton producer, Nigeria is a cotton producer. So how can we then, import this sort of strategy into these other countries and then see how we can build from there? So I think a key point I picked from there is the network between the NGOs, that initiative, the good rapport they have with policymakers, and then the ability to showcase or demonstrate the benefits of this initiative, the economic benefits. That is very important. The economic benefits, that it transcends, politics. As a matter of fact, the other day, I think about 2 weeks ago, Benin was showcasing the World Cup jerseys. I think FIFA gave the project to work up justice for all the countries. So Benin, I think Benin is sold, but from what I saw, they are more or less like the major producers of the jerseys for the World Cup teams for the next World Cup, and that is huge. Okay, that is recognition, and that is a result of that 30-year initiative that was able to pass through those years of maintenance and sustenance. Okay, yeah. So you did mention that it will be worth the stress to actually go find some of those stakeholders involved in Benin and have those conversations with them. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Yes, so I mean, our time is fast spent. Although I think we're just on the nick of time because we started about 5 minutes later. So I think it's safe to say that we will be rounding up now, and just to bring all of the discussions that we've had today into a closing where we can have a little bit of takeaways individually. So first of all, I want to appreciate the speakers for what has been a helpful and an importantly very grounded discussion. Okay, a few key takeaways across both presentations. We identified an unmistakable point, and that is the fact that sustainability compliance is no longer a future consideration. It is already shaping who participate in global CTA trade and on what terms. All discussion has helped us to move beyond a simple narrative, because we have seen that Africa can actually comply, and in many respects, Africa is already complying. And so the challenge here is, how do we move from pockets of compliance to a system-wide readiness? To achieve this, for me, I identified two things, and that is we see that the global compliance landscape itself is not a fixed target. It keeps evolving, shaped by shifting regulations, risks that are happening in the market, just like Mukhtar said. It is bearing these regulations, and not just a gatekeeping mechanism. It's simply as a result of what is happening in the market. And so because of those things that are happening in the market, some of these regulations are coming up. So for us, it's a moving landscape, and so readiness must be continuous, and it's not a one-off. And then a way to now get yourself in a good position is to actually at least get a whole on one area. Okay. Secondly, compliance is increasingly becoming of capability and infrastructure rather than just a list of standards. As we've heard, traceability, certification system, and institutional capacity are central to competitiveness. So for as a takeaway, let's look at that there is a clear strategic opportunity here, because if compliance is becoming the filter for participation in global trade, then it must also become a lever for competitiveness. And so we have seen that Africa is not locked into legacy systems. In many cases, there's opportunity for us to develop compliance frameworks from the ground up in alignment with global standards, but adapting to local realities. And this includes investing in capacity and local expertise, developing inclusive certification models, and embedding traceability as a core feature of production system. Africa CTA Center, our role is to support these developments through trade intelligence, market insights, and platforms for informed dialogue, so that stakeholders are not just reacting to change, but they are positioning ahead for it. And because we are well aware that global CTA trade is becoming more regulated, more transparent, and more system-driven. And so in that kind of environment, success would depend on not just what is produced, but also what can be verified, what can be traced, and what can be trusted. And before we bring this to a close, I would also like to extend an invitation to everyone here to join the Africa CTA WhatsApp community. As I speak now, my colleague Favor will be sharing the link to that WhatsApp community on the chat box there. It is a space designed to sustain this conversation beyond a webinar session such as this. So, and through this community, you start to gain access to timely insights on CTA trades, early access to our policy briefs, opportunities to engage directly with industry experts, policymakers, and practitioners. And of course, it is also a platform for ongoing collaboration across the value chain. So we encourage every one of us to join and be part of this notes. I would like to thank all our speakers once again, all participants for your engagement, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in our upcoming sessions. Thank you and have a great day. It's our usual practice here that everyone we take a screenshot, put on your right. Please just we'll take a screenshot while we say cheese. Are we ready to go? So on the count of 3, 2, go. Cheese.
Cheese.
After that.
Cheers. Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Sylvester. Thank you, Mozart.
My
I
pleasure.
see
My pleasure.
Timothy. I see Seniola. I see Dr. Kojo. I see Sise. I see Anibe. I see Iman Ahmed. I see Abdul Mohammed. I see everybody. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. See you on the next one.
Thank you,
I will also
Muzala.
see you
Bye-bye.
too. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Everybody, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing?
Fine.
Nurse? Marty is not yet here with us. So how did we do? Favor, how did we do?